And once again, welcome to a lecture on qualitative research methods. This is our second lecture, and our second lecture would concentrate on formulating and clarifying research topics. In this lecture, our main focus would be to try and understand the different ways one can generate initial research ideas, and then how these initial research ideas can be translated into researchable topics. So I'm hoping that by the end of this lecture, you should be able to understand ways to generate your research ideas, and then you should be able to also formulate interesting and researchable topics for your term paper or your thesis. I will start off by taking you through the different techniques one can use to generate research ideas. The first one, to generate research ideas, the most common thing one can do as a student is to think widely and deeply about the different things you may want to research as part of your term paper or dissertation. This is one common way we do. Sometimes instinctively we do it without even knowing that we are doing it. The second thing one we do is to look at previous project work titles. You can look at previous or past project work titles. Now you can find the previous project work titles in different sources. You can find it in different sources. You can contact your colleagues to look at what they have done in the past. You can contact your supervisor to look at what he has supervised in the past, and then you look at the topics carefully. And after looking at the topics carefully, you will know exactly what has been done by or supervised by this potential supervisor or this supervisor you have been assigned to, or what has been done in the department previously. You can also go to the library to look at past project works that has been submitted, and that can also give you a very generic or general idea as to what has been researched in the department or school. You may also have been given an assignment. For instance, in this particular course, qualitative research methods, you'll be doing an assignment for me, which I refer to as some sort of a term paper, which you will do for me, which will be a proposal. So when you do this proposal, later on you can come back to the proposal as a course assignment and look at what you did, and that can help you to generate further research ideas. If we were in normal times, we would have done a number of assignments as part of the qualitative research course. So you could have also gone back when you are doing your term paper, your final term paper, or you are doing your dissertation or thesis. You could have gone back to some of these past course assignments to look at what you did to help you in generating further research ideas or build on what you have done earlier. One other critical way you can generate research ideas is to use relevant literature. So for instance, assuming I am researching on the impact of technology in combating coronavirus or COVID, I will have to go online and say, I can go online and search for literature that has addressed this particular research phenomena. And by doing that, it will help me to be able to situate my research topic properly. So we can consult the relevant literature in different sources, either in the library, we can do that online, and many other sources, books and other sources. Then one can also follow the news media. If you follow the news media, one may also be able to generate different research ideas. Apart from that, we can also come together as a group to conduct some sort of brainstorming. Brainstorming is a group creativity activity, and we can all come up with different things, different perspective about a particular phenomena, and through that we may be able to generate our research ideas. One other thing we may also consider is concept mapping. Concept mapping. For instance, assuming I'm looking at technology in the combat of coronavirus, or the role of technology in coronavirus, or generally technology and coronavirus, I can do some concept mapping by looking at technology and corona, or technology in the age of pandemics, as a broader topic area. I can then break it down and see how the different elements are broken down are related to the bigger picture. That will be what we refer to as concept mapping. We'll look at concept mapping in detail later on. One other thing I can also do will be to make notes of ideas as I go on. So if I'm thinking of anything, I can write it down. If I'm looking at past project work title, I can start noting down some few little things in my notebook and making note of all the ideas I am generating, and linking it up in some coherent way can help me to be able to shape up my research topic later on in a better way. I can also discuss my initial ideas I have generated with helpers. I can do that with my seniors. I can do that with potential supervisors. I can also do that with the lecturers that are teaching me in particular areas that are related to what I may want to look at. So basically, these are some 10 ways. It's not exhaustive, but these are some 10 ways one can generate research ideas to help in coming up with a research topic. Okay. Going forward, I want us to take one of the ways one can generate research idea. For instance, if we want to rely on past project work titles, which is very common to us, and then we look at it in detail. And to do that, we're going to go through some 4-step process. The first is to select a number of projects that you may like. So assuming you want to write or you want to do your term paper, you may go to the library and look at the different topics or areas that students have researched in the past, and then you can select a number of them, say 6. 6 is chosen randomly, so you can decide to do 3, you can decide to do 4, you can decide to do 5. Now, for each of the topics or projects you have selected, in the second step, you have to note down your initial thoughts to answer the following questions. And if your responses are your responses could be different for different projects, but it may also be the same. And will it matter? We are going to look at that. So when you select the 6 projects, your first thoughts should be geared at the following 3 questions. What appeals to you about the project? So assuming you have selected 6, what appeals to you about this? Why didn't you choose others, but you rather choose this particular 6 project works? Then you could also try to note down what is good about the project. What appeals to you? What is good about the project? And the third one is, why do you think the project is good? Because in the second instance, you are trying to note down what is good about the project. So if you are able to note down what is good about the project, then you should be able to answer the question, why is a project good? In the third step, you select 3 projects that you do not like. So there have been others you skipped in the first process, in the first stage, by not selecting them. Go back to it, select those ones you didn't like, and then try to answer these 3 questions also. What do you dislike about the project? Then what is bad about the project? Why is the project bad? When you do this, you'll be able to brainstorm through the selection process and generate some ideas that may help you going forward. Now, there are some useful questions one can ask when searching articles and reports for a possible research topic. So even when we are looking through the past project work titles, we are selecting 6, we're asking ourselves some critical questions about what we like about a project, what we do not like about a project. There are some useful questions one may also ask when searching for articles, or you are looking at reports for a possible research topic idea. So what you may ask is, what did the author conclude on? What did the authors conclude on? What was their conclusion? What did they end their project work with? What is the take-home statement from the takeaway statement from their project work? The second one is, what alternative conceptual models or explanations or hypotheses did the authors consider? So you may realize that the authors are using maybe qualitative or quantitative, and they tested some hypotheses if it is quantitative, or they followed a particular conceptual framework. Did they consider alternative ones before relying on that one? You may have to try and explore that. In a third way, you can also consider the methods the authors used to approach the problem. We are saying that before you can conduct research, you must have a research problem. We'll look at some of these things in detail as we go along. You must have a research problem. This research problem is a gap in literature that you are trying to address. And you can ask yourself this question: what methods did the authors use to be able to approach the problem, to be able to address the research problem? You can also ask yourself about the author's conclusions in a different way from the first one. For instance, you can ask yourself whether you accept what the author is concluding on. If not, then you ask yourself, if you are not accepting the author's conclusions, what are the other methods that you as a researcher could have used to test this particular or arrive at this particular conclusion? Then There's also the question about suggestions. Does the author suggest new ways to interpret a different problem? You can also examine that. Then the other one is, are there other problems that that the studies could be using? Are there other methods that the studies could use to address the problem? Yes. So we can ask ourselves these useful questions as we go through articles or reports or past project works to be able to help us in conducting our in generating ideas that may lead to a research topic which we can rely on for our dissertation or term paper. Now, in generating research ideas, I mentioned the issue of concept mapping. Concept mapping. Now, I want us to take some time and look at and see an example of what concept mapping may look like. This is a typical example of a concept map. But this concept map is based on a representation of what we refer to as competitive advantage. Competitive advantage was a topic we looked at in MIS when we looked at the 5 forces model by Porter. So if you look at this particular general thing is competitive advantage. But if you look at competitive advantage carefully, it may involve a number of things in terms of the context in which this study was conducted. Brand awareness, strong brand equity, product differentiation, low cost production. And these were the strategies we looked at. Low cost production, product differentiation were some of the critical strategies that we looked at under competitive advantage. So all these things fall under the generic term competitive advantage. There may also be other issues. So all these issues, subdivided concepts, may be related to the bigger concept in a way. And if we are able to do it, we can then decide as researchers which aspect of the phenomenon we want to look at. So you could decide that you want to actually concentrate on what? Low cost production and how it plays out in terms of what? Competitive advantage. Or you want to look at effective supply chain in terms of low cost production and competitive advantage. Now let me try and see if I can give an example of concept mapping. Assuming I am using technology. Oops, just a second. Okay, so if I was using technology during pandemics, technology in pandemic, so I could say technology in pandemic or during the corona, so I could just say corona. This is the generic concept that I want to look at. So with this generic concept, there are several other aspects that may come out of it. For instance, when we're looking at technology, we may be looking at the issue of design. We can look at the issue of design. We may also be looking at the issue of the development of the technology. We may also look at the issue of adoption of the technology. We can also look at the issue of use of the technology, and maybe lastly we can look at the impact of the technology. So if I'm looking at this as generic concepts that can fall under technology, the bigger term technology, then I can break it down. I'm breaking down the issue of technology and pandemics in terms of design, development, adoption, use, and impact. Now, even if I stop at this concept mapping at this particular level, I can decide that when I'm looking at technology and pandemic as a generic concept, my emphasis may be on the adoption of technology in a pandemic, or the use of technology in a pandemic, or the impact of technology in a pandemic. Now, if I'm going to select a research topic and I just say that I'm looking at technology in pandemic, it may be too broad, too generic for me to deal with. That is why concept mapping is critical, for us to be able to break it down into smaller concepts and decide where we would want to concentrate on. Okay, so let's proceed. Now, what I want to take you through is I want us to ask ourselves a critical question, and that critical question is, what will make a good research topic? If I'm able to generate ideas, I have broader ideas, I'm doing some concept mapping to be able to tease out some smaller phenomena that may fall under the bigger concept. What would make my topic a good one? So we'll look at some of them. Now, the topic I am researching on would be good if I am enthusiastic about it, and also if that particular topic matches my career goals. For instance, if you are doing MSc accounting and you go and choose a topic on a topic that is related to procurement and has nothing to do with accounting. Meanwhile, you are doing accounting, you are working as an accountant, it will not be matching your career goals unless you want to shift career. It will not be matching your career goals. And if you are doing something like that, you may not find it enthusiastic. And for you, the topic will not be good. One other thing you may have to consider is whether there are resources available. Do you have the time to be able to delve so deep into the topic or be able to carry out the research project you are proposing? Will you be able to get data? Assuming you are using a particular organization as your case study organization, will you be able to access data in the organization? How are you going to get that? Do you know anybody in the organization that will be able to help you gain access into the organization? Because gaining access into an organization is critical. And as we will see later on, getting access is at two major levels. For instance, the fact that you are granted access to come into the organization to collect data doesn't mean that you will definitely get the data, because that is only at the first level. The second level is that you should be able to gain access to the participants. The organization may give you access to the organization, but when you come in and schedule interviews with participants, they may not turn up for the interview. So you should be able to, you should be sure whether you'll be able to have access in terms of organizational access, in terms of access to participants, so that you'll be able to get the right data you will need for your study. Will you be able to get the time? If you'll not be able to get the time, if you are not sure you'll be able to get the time, the topic you choose should also be very, very carefully done. Then now, the subject you are choosing should also be topical. It should be trendy, so that it will generate some interest. The fourth issue is when you choose a topic for a project work, you should remember that whilst your main aim may be to be able to produce a thesis or dissertation or term paper and get a grade and get your degree, you should also find the project work you are doing worthwhile pursuing. So the critical thing you have to consider is whatever the outcome is with this degree you are doing, the topic you are doing, will this be worthwhile pursuing? It should be worthwhile. I think it should be worthwhile pursuing, because even after the degree, your project work or your term paper is going to be one of the things you would always beat your chest about and say that I researched into so and so area and this was what I found. Also, the topic should fit the specifications and meet the standards of the university or the department. For instance, in the School of Business and Law, we always say that if you are doing your degree in a particular area, for instance in accounting, the topic should be related to accounting. Otherwise, the department will not accept it. Even if the department goes ahead to accept it, remember that you can only choose a supervisor in the department. So it means that you will not be able to get a supervisor in the accounting department if you go and choose a topic that is related to what? To procurement, because accounting departments lecturers will not be able to supervise a procurement thesis. Okay, so you should choose a topic that fits the specification. Our specification is that it should be in your area of study. If you are doing management studies, your topic should be related to management studies. For instance, assuming you are doing management studies and you are a teacher or you work in the educational setting, then it should be related to maybe some educational management issues, so such that it will match your career goals. You'll be enthusiastic about it somehow, and it will also be what? Worthwhile pursuing, and it will also meet the specifications of what? Of your department. When you generate your ideas and you finally settle on the topic, there should be a link to the relevant literature. And later on, we will see you cannot just choose any topic. You should choose a topic because you realize that there is a problem you need to address. And the problem you need to address can only be identified if you review a literature. So there should be a clear link to the relevant literature in the area that you want to write your project work on. Now, also, the topic you are researching on should be able to provide us some fresh and new insight into the topic you are researching on, so that if you are looking at technology in the age of the pandemic or in the age of the coronavirus. Whatever your outcome is, or whatever your results are, whatever your conclusions would be, it should be interesting. It should give us an idea of how technology is used, how technology is managed, how technology is designed, how technology is implemented, or the impact of technology in the age of pandemics. We have seen the impact of technology in different other aspects of business in our lives, but we may not have seen the impact of technology in the age of a pandemic. So your study may be giving us some fresh insight into how technology is designed, developed, implemented, used, and impacts people's life in the age of what? A pandemic. So your dissertation or thesis or your topic should provide some fresh insight into the topic you would want to look at. Now, all of this, as we go along, you realize that we move from a very broader perspective in terms of generating broader research ideas, in terms of translating our research ideas into a topic. We will get to a stage where we will need to ask ourselves some other questions that we refer to as research questions, and we will have to set research objectives. And when we do this, the research questions and the research objectives should be capable of being stated in a very clear and unambiguous manner. It should be clearly stated. If you cannot do this, you will have a problem answering your research questions and achieving your research objectives. So the research questions and objectives should be capable of what? Being stated clearly. So this is just a summary of some very good critical questions we can ask ourselves going forward. Now the last bit, the research questions and objectives should be capable of what? Being stated clearly. I will take some time for us to look at some example of research ideas and focus research questions that may be suggested. So let's look at this. 1. The items on the left-hand side are research ideas, whilst those on the right-hand side are general research questions one may ask in relation to the research ideas. So for instance, the first one, the marketing of security in credit cards is a research idea. The marketing of security in credit cards. And the research questions may be, to what extent does a credit card company market the measures it takes to ensure consumer security in order to gain competitive advantage? This is a very long research question. Then the second one is organizations, employees, newsletters. And then we ask a corresponding research question. How effective are organizations' newsletters at gaining employee identification with the organization in a geographically diverse organizational structures, and why? Now, these research questions may be long, but you can also carve out a very short and straightforward research question. When we get to, in our subsequent lectures, we'll take some time to see how we can develop research questions and research objectives. But this is just to give you an idea that when you have a research idea, it is a research idea that will lead you to a topic, and later on you will be able to generate some research questions out of the research ideas. Similarly, when we are developing research objectives, the questions we have asked follows from the research ideas, the generic research ideas we may have had. Now, if we are developing the research objective, it will also follow from what? The research questions. In some other discussions, people say that the issue of developing research objectives from research questions is a contentious one. Others will say that you can carve out your research questions from your objectives, and others argue that you can carve out your research objectives from what? Your research question. It's a matter of choice that I will leave to you as we go on. So, for instance, if we have the issue, the first research question going as, why have organizations introduced employee communication schemes? Then the possible research objectives may be to identify organizations' objective for employee communication schemes. Then the second one, the question is, how can the effectiveness of employee communication scheme be measured? So you see that the questions are stated in a way, and the research questions are stated such that you cannot just answer them by a simple yes or no answer. You will have to conduct some research in a systematic way to be able to answer those research questions. So you cannot ask a research question like, do organizations introduce employee communication schemes? Then the answer will be no, they don't, or yes, they do. We cannot ask research questions like that. Now, when we ask research questions, the basic thing is that we should be able to derive research objectives from them. And our research objectives usually will start with the term maybe to understand, to identify, to explore, to establish, to determine, to develop, to estimate. It will always start with some of these generic phrases. Now, whether we are carving research questions or we are developing research objectives from the questions, from the ideas and the topic we may have selected, we always need to subject our research questions, our research objectives to what we refer to as the SMART test. The SMART test. Let's take a look at the SMART test. And the SMART test, as the SMART here is an acronym which we will later understand as we go along. So we have to always check our research objectives, our research questions to be sure that they are what? They are SMART, to confirm that they meet the SMART test criteria. The SMART test criteria goes as follows. Assuming we are checking that our objectives are SMART, we have to first of all ask, are our objectives specific? That's the first letter, S, specific. And when we say specific, what we are intending to question is whether precisely our research objectives can be achieved if we undertake the research. So the question we ask is, what precisely do you hope to achieve from undertaking the research? You must be specific. It should be stated, what your objective should be stated in a very clear and in an ambiguous manner. The second one is measurable. M, measurable. And the question we ask is, what measures will you use to determine whether you have achieved your objectives? How are you going to measure that? If your objectives are not measurable, then it is not a good research objective. For instance, assuming your research objective is to understand the distance from Earth, the distance from the sun to the Earth. It's not measurable. It's difficult to do. You will not be able to do that. You will not be able to do that within the time frame given to you for your project work. So the objective will not be measurable. Then the third one is achievable. Are the targets you have set for yourself achievable given all the possible constraints? And you should remember that the possible constraints when you are doing your project work are time, the issue of data, which we have looked at. Because it's time bound. The project work is time bound. So you cannot go on choosing a topic that you cannot, the results of which you cannot produce within a year or less than a year. If you do that, you will never graduate. So your objective should be what? Achievable. And you should always ask your question, are the targets I am setting for myself achievable given the time frame, the data constraints I have? Then we also have R, which is realistic. And realistic basically means that given all the other demands upon my time, upon data availability and other resources, will it be possible to put all my energy in it and still be able to complete it? Will it be possible? If it is not possible, then it means your project work objective is not realistic. Finally, T, timely. Will you have the time to be able to accomplish all your objectives in the time frame you have set for yourself? Usually we say that you should not set your objectives for your term paper or your objective for your thesis more than 3. It should not be more than 3. Even during my PhD, my questions were not more than 3. Because I had a time frame, and if you ask, the more questions you ask, the more time you would need to be able to answer them. The more tools you will need to measure them. And if your objectives are too broad and they are not very specific, you will also have a difficulty in terms of the timeliness, how you'll be able to complete those broad objectives. You'll be able to achieve those broad objectives within the shortest possible time. Okay, so briefly, I have taken you through how one can generate a research topic, a research idea, and how you can translate the research idea into what? A research topic. What I will implore you to do will be to just sit down quietly and try and see whether you can come up with a number of ideas on your own, translate it into a topic, and then you can share with me on your WhatsApp platform, and we can continue the discussions from there. Thank you very much for listening and watching. See you soon.